Yeah. All right. Welcome. Maybe there are two mics there. You will have to share one. Jons, last year you had the stage all to yourself. Now you have to share it. Maybe for who wasn't there last year. Yeah. For who wasn't there last year, who are you? What do you do? And most importantly, what questions of the audience will you try to answer today?
Yeah, thanks for having me back and this not being turned on.
I think it should work. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so my name is Jons. Was happy to be here last year as well. Spent talking about a operating model or operating system to basically grow and scale your company. It was really interesting. But what I do, I'm the founder of a company called Conway, and we are a boutique consultancy. We advise investors, but also their portfolio companies. And I think the shortest pitch I can give is that we're an on-demand CTO. So we basically give independent technology advice, but at the strategic level. So that's often at the board level for investors, but also for their C-level team. So, and then we basically try to remove friction in their technology stack, and that's often where people end up with us when they have the spaghetti code, as we often call it. So everything is sort of clunked together. There's duct tape everywhere. Then they call us, say, hey, I want to grow from 20 to 100 million. Can you please help to fix this mess? Well, then they have the lovely job to do that, basically. So I'll leave it at that. Hope that helps.
Yes. Jellert, who are you? What do you do? And which questions do you hope to answer?
Who knows TVH? And who knows it from going through the E17 to France? And who knows it from other things as well? Okay, that's still quite a lot. And so I work for TVH. TVH is let's say an international global business and selling parts for machines. And so we sell 60 million parts, different parts. And so we often say it's twice as much as bol.com. And so we have a huge catalog. And 90% of our 1.7 billion is online. And so you could basically say you're the biggest Belgian e-commerce player. And so that's a statement. If somebody knows another one that's bigger, feel free. And so what I do there is, let's say, I say 90%. 5 years ago, it was also 80%, but the majority of the sales still needed a lot of human interventions. So I started with a team of 4. Now it's 180 plus 200 developers. So that's a huge team today. So we went through a whole transformation on processes, systems, technologies, organization to build up, let's say, a first phase in a state-of-the-art e-commerce platform. So what I hope to solve for you guys, if you have any questions on let's say a huge transformation, I think. We didn't sleep a lot, but we worked a lot and learned also a lot of failures and a lot of successes as well.
All right, thank you. Sam, first time on stage, first time in 3 years.
Yep.
For the people who don't know you, who are you? What do you do?
What does TVH actually stand for?
That's an easy one.
Yeah? What is it?
It's the name of the family, Termote van Halst. So it's now only owned by Termote and Dieteren.
So yeah, my name is Sam. I'm one of the founders of Dear Digital. I focus on the Shopify side of things. So hopefully, we can have a lovely discussion about everything Shopify related. And obviously, we have some specific topics that we want to discuss, AI and unified commerce. So I will be focusing on those.
All right, so that's the format of the session as well. We will have 2 topics, unified commerce and AI. And I think we will start with a short intro.
So what do we mean by that? Well, the mark of great software is that it scales and it grows, and each new feature is built as if it was there from the very beginning. Everything works together harmoniously, crafted in consistent style and quality. So we're bringing together everything under one roof, making all parts of Shopify work together even more seamlessly as a unified whole.
All right, Sam, words spoken by Harvey. What does it mean, unified commerce, for you? Because this is a very Shopify view of things. How do you look at unified commerce, and how do you see it being used at brands today?
So for me, it means one central spot where you can organize all of your customer experiences in. I mean, some people start in one place, but then they end the sale or the interaction on another. So it's really important that you have all the data centralized and the system centralized so that you can steer those user experiences to be more sticky, more personal, etc. And if you don't have that in one space, you cannot do all of that. So that's what it means to me.
Right. Jellert, in our emails leading up to the event, you told us that you guys are transforming a bit from multi-channel to unified commerce, but in the same email you also told me that unified commerce is a bit of a bullshit term. Can you elaborate maybe mostly on the bullshit as well?
I use the abbreviation BS.
Yeah, I didn't.
No, the thing is, if you look at our transformation, it's let's say you have to convince 5,000 people of the trajectory, the journey that you're into. And let's say, are we yet successful in explaining what this omni-channel means for our customers, for our business, for our technologies? It's very hard to explain. And then coming up with, let's say, the next level of unified commerce. And for me, it's a bit, let's say, a marketing buzzword that we all probably understand, but it's very hard to explain. And in the end, for me, I'm a business profile. What we want to do is to, let's say, increase or have a great customer experience and create business value. And for that, we say omni-channel for us is not, let's say, connecting different channels. It's a lot more. And so, let's say, it's also a bit buzzwords, but omni-channel for me is creating a fantastic customer experience without friction, no matter what channel you use, combining digital and human in one area, and creating new services and solutions depending on the task or the complexity of a certain topic for a customer. And for me, if you create that as an experience, then you create value. And if it's then called unified commerce or something else, honestly don't care. I think it's more something that we internally can use, but let's not populate it too much.
And can you give us an idea on how that actually works at a company of 5,000 people? How do you go into that transition? Again, it's hard to explain to 5,000 people, but still, how do you move things forward? Can you give all of us an idea how that works for 5,000 people?
If you have an hour, but it's I think you have multiple angles, right? You have the technology side. So on technology side, we went headless, API first. So it's still a journey. I have two colleagues there. Some lost a little bit of hair, I think, due to the journey, and me too. Sorry, Simon. But it's let's say on technology side, you start with a lot of technical depth, and then you have to, let's say, you want to move fast. So I think. How does it work? Is you decouple. You decouple a lot, and you do a lot of reverse engineering to understand how 50 years of technical depth was built up. So that's one element. If you want to move 5,000 people, we have a change network. So with ambassador, evangelist, and all kinds of, let's say, different roles, and over 120 people are involved only to share the story internally, which is also huge work to keep them engaged for multiple years.
All right, thank you. Jons, unified commerce, what does it mean for you and how do you see it at the brands and companies you work with?
Yeah, I think I'd like to even maybe change the perspective a little, because I think all what you said is valid. Whatever buzzword you choose, right? So there's single source of truth and there's all these technical terms, but the more that I learn and the more advanced you become in technology, it's basically not about technology, but about people. And especially big transformations has nothing to do with software. It all has to do with people. Everybody says they want change, but nobody wants to change, which is a subtle difference, but a very important one. And the one thing that I've noticed, especially with bigger consumer retail organizations, is that they have this ambition. And again, it doesn't matter for what you do from a technical perspective, because whatever type of software you select, you can always make it work, even if it's shitty software. But what I mainly see is that the metrics are not aligned. So, for example, I got a briefing from a very large retailer, 1 billion plus in revenue, and they basically briefed us to say, okay, could you create an omni-channel growth plan that doubles online but does not cannibalize offline? I said, okay, thank you. Here's the briefing back. That's complete bullshit, because that doesn't work. Okay, a customer doesn't look at a company or at a brand like, I'm going to buy web, online, social, whatever. We identified over 22 different sales channels, right? And these are all active. You need to be be where the attention is. You need to be active in all. But if you don't adjust your internal, let's say KPIs and metrics, how do you judge your teams? Is never going to work. You can have all the fancy technology in the world, but if your retail director has different metrics and bonuses than your web director, forget about it, because they're not going to be friends. They're going to cannibalize and fight and compete over the customer, which is complete nonsense, because the customer doesn't care where they click pay. If they click pay on your website, in your store, wherever. For me, that's unified commerce. So yes, seamless journeys, 100%, but it's all about people and the metrics that you give to your teams to measure their performance. So externally, it's seamless customer journeys, customer obsession, all that stuff. Internally, you need to adopt that same culture, because otherwise it's never going to work. If you incentivize people on different Christmas bonuses for per channel, which I would say 90% of companies do, yeah, forget about unified commerce.
Is it the same issue for smaller brands? Because you again talk about quite large companies. What do you see as being the biggest blockers for companies, let's say until maybe 10, 20 people? Is again people the biggest blocking factor there? KPI is the biggest factor?
Well, I think it's actually the biggest benefit that they have is that the bigger the company gets, the more complex it gets, right? So, and with complexity, we mean more channels, more countries, more products, like everything all equals complexity. The smaller you are, the more agile you are, but still you need to align on the DNA, right? So if even in a 10-person company you have a web director and a retail director, if they're not incentivized in the same way, so for example, what we often do is put cross-incentivized metrics. So the retail staff also needs to accumulate email addresses for the web team, basically, right? And then the web team needs to be incentivized for offline style advice, for example, right? So then you basically have cross-incentivized, and it doesn't matter which channel anymore, because in the end you're there to serve the customer and to provide that best experience, and not internally fight who gets the revenue, right? So yeah, so I think yes, the problem only gets bigger when you get bigger as a company, but I think these fundamentals still apply also to smaller teams. And the good thing is that they often have less systems, right? Less software in the company. So, for example, just the Shopify backend with 2 POSs. But and I've seen that from if you have 70 stores, yeah, then the software starts. So you need more features basically, and then more complexity, more systems, more. Yeah. So in the end, align on the principles early, and then just from a leadership team all the way down to the front line, you need to own that up, right? To say, okay, customer first and not Christmas bonuses.
Sam, maybe for you, in discussions you have with brands, do you recognize what Jons is saying as well? Where the blockers lay? What are the things that, and the ones that are doing well, are they indeed adhering to what Jons is saying?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. But I think one of the biggest issues is obviously you have different sales channels, but you have to be an expert also kind of in those different sales channels. You cannot be an expert in all of them, basically. So it's like Jon says, you have to work together with people who are focused on different things. And it's kind of hard as a leadership team, I think, to make sure that everything is aligned. So I think the incentive alignment is one of the biggest things. And then obviously, you have a lot of companies that used to have an old business model, and that competes with making sure that the multi-channel approach is relevant, yes or no. And then obviously also from a tech side, right? The things that we see a lot is that there is old tech that is not maybe connected, and you cannot have, I think, unified commerce if things are not connected with each other, because...
And then brands you're talking to, I think it's been easier to create a certain experience in your own web shop, in your own store. How do you see them trying to do it and when they're reselling through another store, through another web shop? How do they do it there? Because that's a lot harder. What do you see in that area?
We don't have that much experience with it, I think, but making sure that all the data is flowing to them, and make sure that you also have the incentives aligned with them. But there are a couple of brands that do it well. I think Thibaut from Wonder is not here yet, I think, but he's doing it nicely. I don't think with partners, but with his own stores and stuff. So I don't know, maybe you guys with a reseller perspective.
Yeah, I have some insights on that. There's 2 types of customers we work for: consumer brands or retail brands. Difference there is consumer brands own product, own channels. Retail brands sell other people's products. But what you see often with consumer brands is that they start selling on marketplaces, and there are specific countries like the US where, I don't know, 60% plus of all online transactions are marketplaces. So I really can't say I don't want to be on Amazon. You sort of need to be. And what we often advise is to shift the perspective on what the goal for that channel is. Sure, it brings in sales, but you rent your customer there. It's not your customer. It's Mr. Bezos' customer, basically. They own the customer relationship, has some value to it, but treat it as a discovery channel. So treat it as a discovery channel, just like social, right? All social channels are also turning into sales channels. That's okay, because they are sort of the closest thing we have to an online shopping street, right? There's people walking in there. You need to fish them in. But then try to incentivize to nudge them to your own channel, because then you can do remarketing, you can do the automated life cycles, and then you own the customer relationship, which is always better. So have a separated value proposition, for example, to bring them in, right? So personalization, for example, like engraving, or I don't know what other things that suit your product category. But I think that's a very fundamental difference to own channels versus indirect, direct versus indirect channels, renting the customer versus owning the customer. And that really helps, because still, yeah, you need to be there, but it's lower margin. It's, yeah, there's benefits and downsides, I would say.
All right, thank you. Jellert, how is it for all of you, for you guys? Is it all of it own channels? Do you sell through any other parties?
If you look at our customer base, we have a lot of, let's say, rental companies or sales and service companies, so the companies who maintain machines, but also resellers. But I think what is interesting, and I think in, let's say, the e-commerce scene, there's not a lot of visibility on it, and that's direct integrations with customers. I think of EDI or let's say API integrations you have with customers backend. And for us, we often say if a customer, we're in the B2B environment, if a customer is with us for 5 years, he will never leave. Which is fantastic, so you know your customer very well. But if we're able to integrate them, and so if he orders through his systems directly from our backend, we have an incremental revenue of 5 to 10%. And so that's, let's say, a different business model, but it's for us it's 160 million on a yearly basis. So it's not nothing, and increasing a lot faster than the other channels. And so let's say if you look at how to integrate directly with customers' backend, I think there's a huge potential.
Okay, nice. To wrap up this first topic, maybe one brand, one company that you know is actually doing it well in terms of trying to offer the client a unified experience, online, offline, own channels, not own channels. Any example that people here need to look at?
I think I'm a bit too influenced by Jons. It's Ping Jalak and Wonder as well. I think are two examples that I have.
I think if we look at, we are lucky we don't have one competitor in our industry. Let's say we have multiple smaller competitors depending a bit on the vertical, but if we look at one company, it's Grainger. And I don't know if you know Grainger, but that's $10-11 billion company also selling parts. And I think what they do fantastically is they're started as a box mover, shipping boxes with parts, but also adding a lot of services into their offering and doing it very well. And for example, as a customer of Grainger, you can let them manage your inventory also on your site, so that they come with people from Grainger and they just manage a part of the full inventory. And so I think the integration of selling services, it's something that we're also looking into.
Okay, nice. Jons, for you?
Yeah, I think the sort of the most obvious examples are like Coolblue in the Netherlands, also Nike and Apple, obviously, right? I think that's sort of the golden standard. Everybody knows them. Well, also to like there's a company that we're now working for called Casablanca Paris, which is a fashion brand going from wholesale to direct to consumer. We're opening up an LA and Paris store for them, and I think what was very interesting, going back to your question, is that they're on that side they're fairly small. But what they really spend a lot of time in investing, what are offline services that we could really elevate the experience to bring it also online. So what did it a bit triggered by COVID, I would say, is that you can book offline style advices for they have beautiful stores, and you can basically take people to walk through the store and show them items and say, hey, could you try this on for me? And I think that's a really nice example of online and offline integration, where it's not just ordering online, picking up in store, all the basics, but actually how to elevate the benefits per channel. That's often what we say. So I think there's a lot of good fashion examples that are trying to do that and really bring the benefits from online to offline and the other way around.
Nice. Thank you. Let's switch to the second topic, being AI. And again, a short intro.
Entrepreneurship is hard, entrepreneurship is important, and it needs to be easier. There's a million things you need to know when you're embarking on this journey, and a million things that you will have to figure out along the way that you don't even know yet. Some people are lucky enough that you have someone you can call or you can text with questions. Some people do not. But imagine how much more entrepreneurship would there be in a world if everyone would have someone by their side who is deeply competent, totally committed to you, available around the clock, with no judgment, with no fear, knowing everything there is about Shopify and entrepreneurship writ large. Technology has advanced so much in the last year that this is now possible.
All right, so for you guys, it was actually founder, CEO of Shopify, a bit harder for you guys to see. I have a question towards, if you now look at, and there's so much talk about AI, what is it going to change, what's not going to change. If you take the perspective of, let's take flexible companies and less flexible companies, often correlated by size, what do you see or what do you think will change within like short term next 2 years and like within the next 5 years? Maybe Sam, if you can start, what do you see or what do you think will change short term, medium term for flexible companies and also companies who are a bit less flexible?
So first of all, I might be a bit biased, but I think that the tech is really real. Some people still think it's not. But even I think if the trajectory changes or stops completely, I think there is like 5 or 10 years of work to implement the stuff that we have at this point in time. And then if you understand that it's probably not going to stop, it's like quite crazy to even fathom what is going to change in the next couple of years. But that's how I see it. I think it's going to be quite impressive and that we actually have no clue what's going to happen. So that's the hard part of your question. I do think for the smaller, flexible companies, maybe a lot of people are investing a lot of money to make their own products. But I think, the big companies that are investing massively in AI, they will probably make that features quite rapidly. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense to try and reinvent the wheel, basically. I think it makes a lot of sense to have short-term subscriptions to big models that can help you, that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Then on an SEO basis, probably a lot will change. It will more be recommendation engines and obviously the chat interfaces that we all know. Voice will probably become really, really big. And then I actually still think, even with all the AI-generated content, that content will be super important. So I think that you really need a content strategy that works and that a lot of people have to put a lot of time and effort into it.
All right, thank you. Jallert, I think you guys fall under the less flexible companies. What do you think will change?
Why do you think that?
I have a feeling. Might be different, but what do you think will change for you guys next 2 years, within 5 years? How do you see it being used today as well in the company?
It's very difficult to predict, but indeed we're less flexible. But I worked at Colruyt before, and I worked at bigger companies before, and we're quite, let's say, entrepreneurial from the West Flanders, West Flemish company. So I think when I started 2020, we had an agency in Ghent. Together we planned 10 different POCs. What can we do with AI? I think of image recognition. Can we recognize a machine part and then say which part it is? To other dynamic pricing models, and they all failed. And why did they fail? It's because the data structure behind it. And so I think if you, let's say, then look at what will change is a bit the perspective of where should you put, let's say, those advanced technologies first is to restructure the data, to clean the data, to unify the data. And I think it's not a direct investment that makes money, but it's more helping to fix the foundations, but a lot faster. And so I think that perspective will change instead of the fancy use cases where we can brag to this audience, for example, but it's more work on your foundation. So I think that's an important one. If you look at today at TVH, how do we use AI? I think we're quite advanced in using machine learning, prediction models, but it's not necessarily under my definition of AI. So we do have some AI cases as well, but for me it's all, let's say, combined as means to an end. What do we want to solve, and then how will we get there? So some use cases, for example, we also quite in the beginning, if you're doing a huge transformation, you create a lot of slides. Although, let's say, in our types of companies, you need a lot of slides. And so, okay, slides is you need to have people believing your story. So what we say, next to our many slides, let's look at, let's say, small wins. And small wins, for example, is the churn case that we often use. And we said, okay, let's look at the data that's laying around that we can use, and let's look at, let's say, a customer type where we don't do a lot with. For example, a churn customer was a customer previously that didn't buy for the last 12 months. And so we said after 12 months, oh, we lost that person or that customer. That's a pity. So by using existing data, thanks to machine learning and, let's say, prediction models, and think of, let's say, data, let's say, delivery date and expected delivery date. For example, if that expected delivery date is not the same as the effective delivery date, you could imagine the customer's not satisfied. If that happens 5 times, he might churn. So if you use all those data, we're now able to predict 80% of the churn. And by using machine learning algorithms, so it's more what you want to solve, and then how, what kind of technology will help us. But the data is key then.
All right. For you, Jons, what's your perspective? And also maybe a question, how do you yourself use it daily?
Yeah. I think it's very relevant apart from the buzz around it or the hypiness, which I really dislike. But I think back in 2002, I started studying kunstmatige intelligentie, AI. So 20 years ago was very different than it is currently. So that was sort of my personal connection to it. But we organized an event last week ourselves, and someone in the audience was for investors. And he asked me sort of a similar question, where do you think we currently are at with AI? I was thinking like, that's a hard thing to frame. But what I replied is that I think we're at the release of the iPhone, right? So the release of the iPhone, not sure if everybody remembers, but it didn't have an app store. Imagine that, right? So, and imagine asking someone in 2007, other than Mr. Jobs maybe, where are we going with this, right? Very hard to discuss, but maybe as a quiz question, who knows which year that was? What was the year of the release of the iPhone? Yeah, I think it was 2007, 2008. So imagine how far we came along from there. And I think that's sort of where we currently are at, right? So GPT was the fastest app of everything to go to 100 million active users, right? So I think it was like a crazy number, especially if you compare it to Instagram and all these other massively grown things. So yes, there is something happening here. I think that's the first thing to establish. And yeah, apart from where we're at, I think the short term is very operational, right? So the things, use case you see popping up now are executional efficiency improvements. So content creation, faster data analysis. If you import all your customer service tickets, for example, what trends do you see? Like operational stuff, very helpful. And I think in 5 years from now, it will transition more to strategic level, right? So to have more predictive insights on your customer base, RFM modeling, all these things that are already somewhat in place. But I think that's a shift we'll see. Short-term operational efficiency improvements, and then later on, it's becoming more strategic to really influence your business also from a business model standpoint, for example, right? Are there specific things that you do? Maybe that's already a follow-up thing, but one of the other sort of key message that we wanted to give there is don't venture out, and I think that's similar to what you were saying, like, yes, AI is great, but it needs to serve a use case. And the first thing you can already do is fix your tech stack, right? Know where your software is, know how it works together, how it is integrated, and start centralizing that data, because data is the oil basically that makes that whole machine run in a way. So if you not have clarity on what your master data is, who owns it, so that's one of our key points of advice. Don't have Shopify or any other commerce platform own your data, right? It's your data, not whatever commerce platform you use. So try to uniform that in your own data warehouse, that it's stored on a proprietary format of your company, not the commerce tool, Salesforce, whatever system that you use. You need to own that data, because that is one of the key things that makes AI work, is the amount of data, but also how original the data is, right? So, and you are the only one that needs to have your product, order, customer, and product data. So that trifecta of data you need to own. So I think that's one of the key things you can already do today, basically, right? So.
And how will that evolve for you? Like, if you look at the brands today, the tech landscape they have today, how will that change? I think you touched upon it a little, that maybe the big companies will be able to spin out a lot of features, and smaller technologies will have a harder time actually competing with all of the big technology companies. How do you look at it? Do you agree with this?
Yeah, I think there's sort of two types of them. There are software companies and software-driven companies. And an e-commerce company for me is not a software company. Software company makes software and sells software, and an e-commerce company uses a lot of software. But the big benefit of that is that you can basically ride the wave with all these SaaS applications that you have. That's a very different model than like 10, 20 years ago, because then you had to install software and all that crap, which was legacy. But now the good thing is that you pay a service for them, so they are going to integrate. Well, that's also what you heard from Mr. Lutke, that they're going to integrate a lot of AI into their software, and you just need to keep paying your subscription and you're going to get it, right? That's great. But apart from that, and especially when you go a bit bigger, the data still needs to be owned by you, because that is still the big differentiator. So I think, yes, you will benefit from all these SaaS applications, but even then, know what your digital backbone looks like. And also, if you want to switch commerce platforms or things like that, then still you need to own that data. So that's the key thing that's going to train the AI. And then I think the first thing that will be benefit there is that this whole story around self-service BI, I've been hearing that for 10 years. I think it's complete bullshit, because it doesn't work. Like, people are not trained, well, generic people in functional teams are not BI specialists, right? And they can go on courses and you're going to try to, it's not going to work. It's always going to remain a service deck until now. Because if you look at the new Claude system, for example, or GPT with code interpreter and things like that, the biggest benefit of AI, as I frame it, is that computers finally gotten smart enough to communicate like us, versus us trying to communicate like them with touchscreens and mouses and keyboards and all that stuff. So I think that's the biggest benefit, is that you can start talking to your data warehouse and just say, hey, what was my sales last year? Or could you just predict the trend of the last 3 years in a human way? And then they start plotting graphs, right? So I think that's one of the key benefits of this all becoming data-driven. Yeah, it maybe there's companies selling that service. I don't believe in it, because it's just not going to work. I haven't never seen it work in practice. So I think that's something that's going to bring a lot of short-term value already, if you have your data sorted.
All right.
I have a small question, maybe less sexy topic, but you refer to it now. Is it going to be technology that is so easy to use that you don't need a lot of courses, and you don't need to try and get your employees on this new technology because it's going to be so native to people? Or do you actually think that it's going to be a huge challenge to make sure that everybody makes the transition to this new technology, however it will be implemented?
Yeah, I think that's already what we touched on. Same with unified commerce. I think many things are not so much in the tech, but are in the people. So what I see mainly is that there's resistance. People are just don't trust it, don't want to use it. It's in the culture. And yes, I think this definitely unlocks that, because if you already, for example, in Claude, you can create a project, as they call it. It's a folder where you upload some slides and PDFs and other things. And it basically trained the model on that already. And then it basically creates a custom course. So I think that's the shortest description I could give of current AI. It's a very smart intern. It's an intern you can keep asking and never gets tired, in that sense, right? So yes, I think it will do massive things in terms of, if you have your knowledge base set up correctly. It's basically a personal trainer and a personal coach and a personal intern that's going to help you with all these things. Again, if you have your data and your knowledge base sorted. So yeah, I think, training companies, they should either benefit from it or get run over, but yeah.
And you think fear is going to be a big impact there? I mean, fear the people, the employees, like, will be replaced? Or do you think that that is not going to be huge? I mean, because you hear it so much in the news, people are just getting stressed out. I mean, is it a problem for bigger companies, I would assume? The more flexible companies might not have this necessarily, but how do you guys look at that?
I think it's indeed a fear. So if you talk about, let's say, for example, copywriting, translations, those things, today you have already quite advanced technology that can do that for you. And so I think, indeed, if you talk with the people, you have a lot of resistance in adopting, and it's not pixel perfect or etc. So I think there, indeed, it's the case. How to tackle that is, let's say, you have two types of change, in my opinion. You have let's say, a short ambitions but a painful change, and you just replace. So that, I think that's the hard one. Or you learn how to use those technologies. And for example, copywriting, translations, you can use it for 80% and then do with the 4 eyes principle, check if it's right or not. So I think you have two ways of doing it. And let's say the hard way is sometimes faster than the soft way, but depending on your culture.
Yeah, I think it's yes, certainly there are certain companies and roles that their business model will definitely be affected. I don't want to own a stock image company at the moment because Midjourney is just basically a better version of that. So yes, there's definitely effect. But I think in general, for me, the principle is not so much AI will replace humans, but AI will replace humans that cannot use AI, right? So yes, if you're not open to it, if you don't want to use it, then so it's not so much human versus AI, but human plus AI. I think that's sort of the key mantra that you read a lot about. I think that's very true, and especially like if you take classic professions like lawyers, for example. Yeah, they're fucked if you ask me, because there's no human that can process that amount of information, and then yeah, you have a better. But still, what is the main benefit of a lawyer? Not just processing legal documentation; it's the human factor, right? So the fact that there's a person that you trust, that you can go along with the meetings. So yes, if there's lawyers and copywriters and people like that are adopting the philosophy and starting to use it in a better way, yeah, then it's again human plus AI. So you need to be sort of AI driven and enabled, and not say, okay, this is bullshit technology, not going to work, just start using it and adopting it.
I think in this era, you have to reinvent yourself on a daily basis. And so reinventing yourself using technologies and let's say focus on how to automate my work. And I think that mindset is so critical and it will become even more critical. And you have so many tools laying around. I think in our team we have, let's say 150 people and we use 102 different technologies. Fantastic. Fantastic, because I think trying and learning how to do things faster and automate things, that's the way how it should go.
It's one of the services that we now get asked to do for investors quite a lot, is do basically AI readiness check, right? And we just do just take the balance sheet and say, okay, what are processes on the revenue or on the cost side basically, and which one will be affected from a positive or a negative perspective. And initially it will be just efficiency improvements, but then also later, are there specific new revenue opportunities that you would get, right? So I think that's a very important thing to check based on your processes and based on the people within the company doing certain things. But every type of knowledge work, yes, and that's another thing that's interesting. I think there's been talked about like automation and what is it, fourth industrial revolution, all that buzzword. Initially, everybody thought like it's going to be robots and therefore blue-collar workers. But I think it's more white-collar workers that are being affected, and knowledge workers, not so much the factory lines in that sense, right? So I think that's already a thing that is interesting that we would have predicted 5 to 10 years ago.
All right. I think we've asked enough questions between all of us. Questions from the audience. I think we have a catch box there who will start with the first question. John, as you've catched it, do you have a question?
Hello, hello. Yes, maybe the first question to Jellert and Jons. What's the best example you've seen of a company adopting artificial intelligence in that case? Do you know of any example you can share? Just a simple question. Just a little question.
Taking time to think
Yeah.
to answer an important question.
Indeed. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's not so much about adoption yet, because I think that's now sort of started also to what you said earlier, is that the technology to adopt are now sort of being released, right? So OpenAI and Midjourney, like these are the more the foundational companies that are using it for them, specifically for themselves. And I think much of the buzz you now see are companies that are applying it to specific new apps, right? So I know of a company, for example, that used to do portrait photography, just physical, come to your room, take a picture. And they are now converting that into a AI-driven one where you upload 10 of your images and they publish. And I think that's also to what you're saying, it's good enough. It's not as good as a actual photo, but it's good enough for this specific use case. So it's, I don't know, 80%, 75% of the actual, but maybe that's good enough. And it went from, I don't know, 250 euros per photo to 10 euros per photo, right? And if you don't adopt, so I think those are very tangible examples. And I think you can apply that also to the e-com space, right? For pack shots and things like that. Turning pack shots from a flat image to a moving video or animation or things like that. I think for now, also the most relevant use cases for this audience are in that realm.
Thanks.
I think for me, I think TVH is relatively advanced, but the true example is not a company, but is Singapore. And I think I would, let's say, invite you to use ChatGPT and just ask what is the legislation in Singapore on AI, and you get at least 15, 20 different initiatives how they democratize AI, and I think it's fantastic. And so they have a national AI strategy. They're training almost everybody in the country how to use AI and all those elements, and I think it's not, let's say, putting up on restriction how to use it, but it's really, let's say, try accelerate the usage of AI. So I think that's a real example.
Yeah, maybe to follow that, I think that's often a tip I give is that people are, they also ask about the hallucination, right? Is this data correct, yes or no? If you spend an hour with any type of bot, so GPT or Claude or whatever LLM you want to use, start questioning it about the topic that you're an expert in, because then you actually know, is this real that he's telling me, yes or no? And I think that's a very good way to start adopting it for people that are a bit afraid, for example, to start using it, right? And I think that's in general things to try.
Thank you.
Jons, maybe also to the other ones who have experience with Shopify Odoo, you mentioned make your data proprietary. There's some of us in the room that use Shopify, that even use Odoo for ERP. How can you put this in practice?
First, define your own data model. So the data model basically, I wouldn't say cleans, but it stores it in the format that is specific to your company, right? And if you have a different data model when you're in fashion versus when you're in CPG or whatever, right? And I think that's one of the key things, because the definition, and that's one of the biggest problems between data integration between systems, everybody has a different definition of a product or a description or all these different components of your data model. And even the fact of doing that exercise is already where the value is, right? So to basically first do that, what is the definition of, for us, and master data for me consists of 3 core things: customer data, product data, and order data, which is basically your sales. And all these 3 have their own data definition. And if you, for example, would want to switch from Magento to Shopify or for Shopify to Commerce Tools, every system has the different definition of those 3 things. So a customer is not a customer. It's defined based on the data model of that specific software system that you're using. And my advice would be is make your version of your company, because then there's all these different systems that want to do something with those 3 types of data. So Klaviyo, for example, for emails, they also want to do something with your product and your customer data, but that is a different data definition than Shopify. So that I think that's one of the core things, and then store it in your data warehouse. So the project would be, okay, let's define our own master data model. Based on that, that's a definition that we as a company own it, and that then gets propagated to all the different systems that you have. And that's often what happens in an integration layer, or middleware is often also called. And you extract all that data via, we're going a bit into detail, but the ETLs, so extract, transform, load, that sort of systems that do that for you. They store it in a data warehouse, and then you visualize that with something like Power BI or Looker or things like that. But that step is very important, that you own, and then it's in your data warehouse, it's stored in your data model. And if you then later switch to a different system or platform, or want to integrate one, you basically enforce it onto that system versus the other way around. And that then you ensure that you own that data for the future as well.
But picking up on it, are there tools, apps that already integrate into Shopify, into Odoo, into any other software that enable this? Or because I'm not a techie, I don't know how to even start building my own database, for example.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's companies that can help you do that, but yes, there are systems that they call themselves IPaaS, so Integration Platform as a Service. And I have to be gentle here, but I don't fully believe in that value proposition, because I've learned that it's not true. Because the problem with those systems is that they try to unify a process that is very hard to unify, because there are always things that fall outside of their scope. So yes, I think what you would need to look at is ETL systems. So ETL systems are a system that extract data, transform the data, and load the data. And they're very good examples of that. And I think there's partners that can help you implement something like that. And that basically streams the data into a data warehouse like Snowflake or BigQuery or things like that. But the category of software you're looking at is ETL.
Okay. Thanks.
Other question?
Also, question for Jons regarding the proprietary data. It sounds like quite some resources need to go into making data proprietary. Listening to you, is there some sort of metric of size, may it be orders, may it be customers, whatever it is, where you would say a company reaches a critical stage or complexity? You can use whatever metric you think is the most relevant. From when on these efforts should be made to make data proprietary?
It's hard to make an exact number, but I would say below 10 million in terms of revenue, I wouldn't do it because it is an expensive thing to do, and you will not reap enough benefits of doing something like that. The bigger you get, the harder it will be to do because there's more data, more systems. So, yeah, it's a bit arbitrary, but I would say somewhere around 10 million. Below, focus on just building the business with whatever type of software that you have that you can do it. And then later, when you start further scaling up, if you don't fix it, the problem only gets bigger in a way, right? And then you might also want to re-platform or switch to different platforms, and then it really helps to have this stored in your own way. And that also, I think that answer also applies to doing something with AI. Yeah, just first wait and have the systems that you're already using it, like Shopify, integrating it before you start your own AI project or whatever, right? So I think, again, it's a bit of arbitrary division, but I think that, so when you're growing towards 100 million, and then you can have you have your own dedicated data team as well. You have your own dedicated BI team, and then it sort of serves the investment that you'll make to do something like that.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, and maybe one last thing. And what we see is that a lot of private equity companies that like to acquire companies like yourselves, they get interested after 20 million in general, right? So because then a lot of the risk is gone, so it's an easy ride for them. And I think that's often where we sort of brought in as well, like, hey, I'm going to acquire this company, but I'm flying blind. I don't trust the data. I'm not sure where it's coming from, or I just have the commerce data. Then it also helps then it substantiates an investment to do something like that. And they can pay for it as well.
I have a question for Leonard. First of all, say hi to Dominique when you see him, because he's a friend from Kortrijk and from...
Obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Everybody knows each other now.
Yes, we kennen elkaar allemaal. So my question is, Dominique, he gave me a call, not last summer, but in 2023. He wanted to know a bit more about Odoo manufacturing. The idea was then to do some kind of sandbox proof of concept about Odoo manufacturing, to see what it's like. It was for some parts assembly thing, and so I just explained them how Odoo is evolving. And my question is today: is Odoo in some shape or form present, or is it Shopify, or?
Dominique is the CEO of TVH, and that's the person that you're referring to.
Yeah.
But no, I think, let's say, we're moving to Oracle, Salesforce, or e-commerce is a headless architecture with Acquia Drupal as front end. Commerce tools will be integrated, and so we go, let's say, quite modular, and those are not in scope.
Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions? Here in the back.
Maybe just one addition, if I may. We also that's for, let's say, our big chunk of business. But we also have smaller initiatives on the side, and I think for let's say we have a scale up that does telematics and wants to move towards predictive maintenance. And so we have hardware, software installed on machines, and they give you a lot of data and insights on the usage of your machine. If you can combine that and selling a part, if a part will be broken in a couple of hours, I think those scales up are fantastic. But there we use, let's say, other technology. And so it might that Odoo will be in scope for some initiative on the side. That might be the case indeed.
All right, question in the back.
Change is all about people. Do you also have some examples where you did manage to get the change done because of the people? And what did you do then?
You want to take this one? No?
Well, I think one of the key things that we've seen, especially when you have transforming companies who are mainly retail and therefore offline focused, that also want to do something online, right? I think one of the key things that I've seen there is that they think that the job's done when the system goes live, but my mantra is always it's live when the team sort of feels comfortable and they want to actually, they determine when something goes live, because then it's actually being used. And I think one of the key tactics that I've seen helpful and useful there is to appoint a champion. So someone who is a good cultural leader, so has how do you say, substance within the company, and that person needs to have actual tangible benefit of the change that you're trying to achieve, because then that person is going to serve as an ambassador as well, right? I think that's one of the key things, and that person needs to be operationally involved. So no CEOs and management people, someone who is an internal leader and that has benefit of that change that you're trying to achieve, if it's a system implementation or whatever, because then that person starts to infect other people in a positive way.
I think to add on that, I talked about the change network with champions, evangelists, ambassadors. And so in the stakeholder mapping, we also identified the influencers. And so we I deliberately took some true influencers from all kind of functions. And that was also, let's say, very important to our change story. And another thing that I'm an anarchist. I don't like hierarchy. I don't like fancy titles. And I often say, show, don't tell. Let's say we first create something, we show it to the world, show that it's value and it's not fluffy on slides. And I think in some cases that is also very helpful to get people moving with you. And you go a lot faster. And then, let's say, telling crazy stories for many months and doing analysis. So I think it's a bit a combination of having a lot of people involved or not a lot of people involved, and show, don't tell.
Fully support that. To add to that, I think the tactic is to have an illustrator. So there's a lot of people that can talk very well, but they make slides. But there's actually people that can draw things. And if you draw that storyline, in Dutch a praatplaat, then it really helps, because then everybody starts referring to the praatplaat. No idea to translate that, but I think that really helps as well. So have that champion draw the vision, have an illustrator draw the vision that you have and make it very tangible and visual. Show, don't tell, yeah, for sure.
All right, last question from the audience. Otherwise, I still have a few. Yes, here, it's there. If you can throw it quite far.
Hello, I do not have a e-commerce anything. I'm just here as a customer who uses a lot of e-commerce. And I feel, I don't know, it's more an opinion question from you both, but as soon as I feel that something is AI driven, for example, like a chatbot, I'm out. And I was wondering how you look at that as a company. Because, for example, yesterday I had an experience with Zara, and I asked 5 questions, and then they just closed the chatbot. And I was like, okay, fuck you.
Can I start with a question? Have you used GPT or Claude?
A lot.
And do you also dislike that then, or?
No, because then I can ask, and I can keep continuing asking questions. And I feel like these chatbots right now are made to, when they did a certain task, they just stop. And I feel like, yeah, I need a human interaction. I need to be able to get angry or happy or frustrated or something.
Yeah, I think you already gave part of the answer that I would also give. I think one of the key things that, in general, the AI or chatbots, they sucked so far, right? Also Siri, for example, at Apple, like, they have enough money to have a proper AI team, but that was horrible. So now they're integrating OpenAI because the technology was just not good enough, simple as that. And I think the second thing there is that it actually puts an additional emphasis on the human connection, right? I think the things that will really survive is stores that add some value to the offline experience. So also trying to be gentle here, like in the Netherlands you have a company called Action. They sell plastic crap you don't need. And that is it's a very functional shopping experience. I hate it, as you just heard, but like for me that doesn't add any. I feel that I'm doing someone else's job in a way, right? You just walk through these things, but that doesn't really add anything to it. Versus a company where there's an actual like human that gives good advice, like the Apple Genius Bar, for example, right? Something like that. So Not sure what your question was, but I think I think that hopefully answers it a little bit.
Jellert, some any additional answers?
Many opinions on chatbots and all those, let's say, AI-enabled conversations. I think it's okay to route questions. For example, I fly a lot with United. I have a lot of problems. And then being able, let's say, to quickly route it to the right agent that knows the knowledge from my case end to end, I think that's important. Otherwise, you talk with agent A, then agent B, agent C, and it's also very frustrating. So to route questions, I think it's useful. And then, let's say, the human interaction is critical. So as soon as it's routed, get a true human on the line or on the chat. I think the second one is on specific, let's say, use cases or parts in your journey. It can be useful. For example, if you shop on Zara, I don't shop a lot, so it will be difficult to make a use case. But imagine you're looking for, let's say, a certain size of a shirt, and that then you have a pop-up of a kind of a bot asking you more questions. Are you looking for a size M or a size whatever? We also have some alternative, so that he comes up with, let's say, proposals that might help you. I think there you might have useful already, let's say, in place use cases. So, for example, in the at Accor and the hotel company, we had a callback function. Customers could, let's say, call me because I have a problem with a certain reservation. We thought, okay, let's try it. It was used a lot and it was very effective. So I think by depending a bit on, let's say, the scenario in your user journey, it might be interesting, but not, let's say, an end-to-end replacement of the human.
And by the way, I'm the same as you. Like, especially where you notice where it's annoying when you notice that it's sort of a cost-saving thing, right? So when you start calling a phone company or an internet company because your internet is off, it's a very bad moment to interact with a customer service bot, right? Because for them, you just want to scream to a human and say, "Hey, go fix this," and then it doesn't work. A positive example, for example, is KLM, the airline company. They have a pretty good, sophisticated machine, but also that one has access to your flight information and things like that. So that is specific to you, and then it becomes relevant again. If it's generic bot that just tries to serve you off with generic answers that you are just on your website, yeah, then I fully agree with you.
Sam, any additions to the answers?
A lot has been said already. I think you have kind of a focus on, if you know that it's an AI bot, you just dismiss it already a bit, while you can have really bad interactions with humans as well, and you don't dismiss the humans. So I think it's a bit the same that I was asking before. Like, we have to be more knowledgeable about what they can do and how you can use them, etc., and how we can train people to use them. And now you see a lot of examples where it's not done correctly, basically. But I personally think that you will see a lot of examples where it will be useful. But it's good to hear your feedback so that we know what to improve, basically. But yeah, it's going to change a lot, I think, in the future. I think maybe if we sit here in 3 years, you will more likely be loving to chat with an AI chatbot than with a human, because he can also make mistakes. Or maybe we just supercharge the human with the AI, and then you're still interacting with a human, but he's supercharged on his end with AI. So I don't know where that might be going, but either way, I think it's going to change.
Maybe a question for you still, Sam. I think there are quite a lot of brands here on Shopify. I think you are the main Shopify expert here, I would say. How do you see unified commerce, AI related? How do you see Shopify evolve? Which steps do you see are next for them that everybody here should know about?
It's always hard to talk about the product roadmap of Shopify, and they have announced their AI sidekick and stuff, and it hasn't came out yet. Maybe they think it's not good enough, like Ashley just asked. But I think they have an insane amount of investments, and so yeah, I think there will be a lot coming out in the next couple of months. So it's a quite exciting time to be implementing the software of this kind of companies that have a straight vision or a clear vision, to really keep on investing in this changing world. So I don't really have anything concrete, but it will be quite impressive.
All right, final question for the three of you. What's one thing then these people hear from tomorrow when they step into the office? What's the first thing practical that they have to do? Unified commerce, AI, nothing to do with these two topics, what do they need to start tomorrow morning, first thing in the office, or tell the people that don't want to join or don't want to participate in any change, what do they have to do?
Well, I really wonder if you can just raise your hands, like if you work in a team, how many of the people, like raise your hand if you think that 50 or 60% of the people in your team use AI. So it's quite a lot already. So that's what I was going to say, like make sure you just interact with it and everybody in the team interacts with it so you can learn fast what it can do and what it can't. But apparently, yeah, it's quite insane how many people do it already, so go for it.
For me, it's a bit, let's say, the mantra of my life. Don't follow the rules. Just try stuff. Be an entrepreneur within your company, and I don't listen always to what other people are saying, because I think there's still so much to discover on AI and so much to do. So start doing, even if it's not allowed. Just do it. Or join TVH.
Yeah, I think the main thing that I think that's also what we discussed up front is a very important question is what will not going to change. So I think my main advice would keep talking to customers, either from a digital or a physical perspective, because in the end the customer is everyone's boss. So I firmly believe in customer obsession, and then a thing you could do with AI for that is basically extract all your customer service tickets and run it through one of these LLMs to see what are the things that you spot, right? Because that's where it's very good at. It's very good at processing high volumes of data, and yeah, you couldn't never hire someone to do something like that. So I think keep focusing on the customer obsession and finding technical solutions to do that better. I think that always helps in the future.
All right, Sam, Jellert, Jons, thank you very much.